They called it a diplomatic punishment. That's what the Galactic Council named the sanctions, the embargoes, and the public trial Earth was forced to attend. Every representative from every advanced alien species sat in that massive obsidian chamber on Jar-Thul Prime, passing judgment on humanity like they were some backwater criminals. For what? For fighting back. 1 year before the trial, Earth had defended itself from a mining operation illegally set up by the Tavari Empire, a smug, tentacle-faced race that believed lesser species should be grateful for being exploited. Their machines had begun drilling into the Mariana Trench without warning. No communication, no agreement, nothing. Just giant alien rigs cracking the Earth open like a nut. At first, humans sent warnings, then envoys. Then came the explosions. 3 rigs destroyed, 37 Tavari casualties. And suddenly Earth was branded aggressive, uncivilized, and a threat to galactic peace. In the months that followed, food shipments stopped. Trade partners disappeared. Earth's satellites were accidentally knocked from orbit by cosmic debris. And then came the biggest humiliation: the forced attendance at the Galactic Council's judgment seat. Ambassador Naomi Ressa stood before them, the only human allowed inside the trial chamber. A slim woman with tired eyes and skin the color of rich mahogany, she looked far too human compared to the elegant, glowing forms and hulking beasts that surrounded her in the circle. "You are a violent species," hissed Chancellor Axarith, a floating crystalline being from the Zeln Consortium. His voice echoed unnaturally, like a bell rung underwater. "You are not yet ready for higher civility. Your world shall be contained." Naomi's jaw clenched. Her hands, hidden in her robe, curled into fists. She wasn't angry for herself. She was angry for the children in Nairobi who had no grain delivery that month. For the scientists in Luna's research dome who lost power when their solar arrays were sabotaged. For the millions on Earth living under the weight of fear, starvation, and silence. Still she bowed. "We understand your verdict," she said. "No, you don't," whispered a voice behind her. It came from General Vakor of the Trinlai, one of the Council's military arms. He grinned with tusks showing. "But you will." Earth left that trial humiliated, stripped of trade rights, surrounded by patrol fleets, no ships in, no ships out, and worst of all, broadcast across every civilized planet as a cautionary tale. That was the moment humanity stopped pleading. They started planning. In the bunkers beneath Geneva, in the cyber labs of Seoul, in the deep silence of the Martian colonies, they gathered. Not governments, not politicians, but leaders, fighters, survivors, people with nothing left to lose and everything to take back. One of them was Elias Ward, ex-Special Ops, now labeled a terrorist by the Intergalactic Council. He had one eye, a half-mechanical spine, and a reputation for breaking bones before asking questions. He'd watched his sister die when a council blockade kept her cancer meds from arriving. "You don't keep beating a dog and expect it to stay loyal," he said during the first meeting. "Eventually it bites, and humans, we bite hard." They called their operation Black Ember. Not a war, not a rebellion, a reckoning. Quietly, they began hijacking council drones, spoofing communications, gathering intelligence, rebuilding old weapons the council had banned after humanity's induction into galactic society. Then they started vanishing. Freighters, research ships, scavengers, slipping into the asteroid belts where council eyes couldn't see. Naomi was part of it too, publicly still an ambassador. Privately, she was the voice of vengeance. "You made humanity kneel," she whispered during one transmission. "Now we rise, and you will remember us not as beggars, but as the storm you never saw coming." It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about making them pay. One act of cruelty at a time, The Council had chipped away at humanity's pride, their unity, their hope. And now they had nothing left but rage, the kind of rage that made stars go dark. Space was cold, but rage burned hotter. In the silence beyond Saturn's rings, 3 stolen Tevari scout ships hovered in formation. Painted matte black, their heat signatures were disguised with old Terran stealth tech, the kind outlawed centuries ago. Inside the lead ship, Elias Ward paced like a caged animal. "Are we clear on orbital paths?" he asked, eyes scanning a rotating 3D hologram of the target, a Council communication relay perched on a rogue moon. It was a critical hub for interstellar traffic between the inner systems. Disabling it wouldn't just blind the Council, it would make a statement. "We're synced," replied Lynn Tanaka from the helm. She was young, barely 25, with augmented neural ports lining her neck like silver rings. Born post-blockade, she'd never seen Earth without hunger. 10 seconds to breach window." Elias nodded. "No survivors. Leave the wreckage floating." Nobody flinched. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were reminders that every kick the Council landed came with consequences now. The first explosion came like a heartbeat, silent, then screaming red across the void. The relay's shield dome shattered under the impact of a kinetic torpedo. Then came the rail fire, slicing through metal and flesh with equal indifference. Alarms blared in alien tongues. The station's defense drones scrambled, but humanity had learned. They jammed them, turned their own code against them. Inside the station, screams cut short as gravity systems collapsed. Oxygen vented into space. Bodies, Council workers, mostly Arctai and Jarvan, floated like trash, still twitching. Lynn's voice was calm. "Relay neutralized. Council blackout across 4 sectors." "Broadcast the message," Elias growled. She tapped the console. Across thousands of planets, from core worlds to the edge colonies, holoscreens flickered. A single message appeared in every known language. Humanity does not forget. Humanity does not forgive. This is only the beginning. Panic followed. Council newsnets tried to cover it up, but the footage leaked. Soldiers with Terran features, voice logs in English, the unmistakable brutality of Earthborn anger. On Jar Thol Prime, the Council convened in chaos. "This is terrorism," spat Chancellor Axareth, his crystalline body pulsating erratically. "It's an act of war," thundered Vakor, pounding the table. "They were supposed to be under control," another shouted. But Naomi Reza was calm. She watched from the shadows of Earth's silent seat, still exiled, still voiceless, but no longer powerless. "They're not under control anymore," she said quietly. "You made sure of that." Meanwhile, back on Earth, things were changing. The blockades still floated in orbit, but fewer now. Council ships had started disappearing, their crews never found. Satellites were blinking offline one by one. The sky wasn't safe for them anymore. And in the underground cities, built after food riots turned violent, a new mood had taken root. It wasn't despair, it was fury. People no longer whispered. They trained. They built weapons out of scraps. Kids barely 10 were learning how to jam scanners and disassemble plasma rifles. One girl, Amira Kale, was already known among rebels as the Shadow of Nairobi. At 12, she hacked a Council transport security grid and rerouted it straight into a mountain. No survivors. She didn't smile when she did it. She just asked if it had food on board, and when they said yes, she told them to gather every crumb before the Council could retaliate. There was no innocence left. Only survival. Only retribution. And far away, at the edge of known space, a massive ship was being built. Hidden inside a hollowed-out asteroid, powered by a stolen quantum core, the resurgence was unlike anything humanity had fielded before. It wasn't sleek, it wasn't pretty. It was a blunt instrument, a ship built to smash through fleets and send a message in wreckage and fire. Elias Ward watched its construction with grim pride. "It's almost time," Lynn said beside him. He nodded. "They've lived with peace too long. They forgot what we are." "What are we?" He turned, face half in shadow. "We are the species that invented war before language. We loved it, mastered it, buried it under false peace until they dug it back up." He paused, staring into the darkness of space. "Now we'll remind them." The Galactic Council, once a symbol of interstellar order, was unraveling thread by thread. Panic wasn't something they were used to. Their rule was founded on cold logic, ancient treaties, and superiority complexes built over millennia. But none of that mattered when communication lines went dark and outposts turned to ash. They had labeled Earth as primitive, undisciplined, predictable. And now, they didn't know what Earth would do next. Meetings ran around the clock in Jar Thul Prime. Military fleets were redeployed, trade convoys rerouted, border worlds braced for attacks from the shadows. Everywhere, whispers of the Terrans spread like wildfire. Some feared them, others admired them, and a few began questioning the Council's righteousness altogether. Back on the dark side of Jupiter's moon Callisto, hidden beneath its icy crust, Elias Ward stood over a table surrounded by holomaps and war schematics. Around him were rebels, defectors, rogue AI tacticians, and even a few non-human allies who had grown disillusioned with the Council's lies. One of them, a four-armed Drexian named Varlock, spoke in a guttural snarl. "The Council's grip is weakening. Already 3 systems refuse to enforce the embargo. If we strike a major core world now, it will break their illusion of control." Elias grinned without humor. "That's the idea." "But which target?" Lynn asked, eyes scanning planetary coordinates. "We could hit something symbolic, like the Academy of Galactic Peace on Lyros, or something strategic, like the drone foundries orbiting Erix 3. "No," Elias said. "We hit their pride." He tapped the holoscreen, bringing up the rotating image of Solaris, a glittering city world considered the jewel of the Council's civilization. Rich, untouchable. Entire generations of nobles, diplomats, and strategists called it home. It was protected by orbital cannons, defense grids, and an elite security fleet. To most, it was suicide. To Elias, it was the point. "We infiltrate. We sabotage their systems from within, and then we make their skies burn," he said. "Let them know that even their safest nest isn't beyond Earth's reach." The plan was madness, impossible even, which made it perfect. A month later, the operation was underway. Lynn, disguised as a cybernetic trade envoy, infiltrated Solaris under a forged identity. Varlock posed as her security escort. Inside the city world's gleaming towers, luxury blinded the eyes. The people there still believed in the Council's version of reality, that humanity was a pest being disciplined, that rebels were just terrorists, that the system was eternal. But those illusions shattered when the power grid failed. The moment the lights died, panic set in, elevators froze, gravity destabilized, automated drones turned on their handlers. Across the main broadcasting towers, Naomi's voice cut through the darkness like a blade. "We are not terrorists. We are your reflection. This is the pain we endured. You just didn't feel it, until now." Then the sky turned red. The resurgence arrived through a cloaked slipstream, breaching Solaris's orbital defenses with terrifying speed. No negotiations, no demands, just thunder and vengeance. The first barrage shattered the planetary shield array. The second ripped into the spaceports. Fire rained across towers that had never seen war. Council guards scrambled, civilians screamed. but it was too late. Elias led the ground assault himself, boots stomping over marble walkways stained with smoke and blood. He wasn't here to conquer. He was here to remind them. One council envoy begged at his feet. "Please, please, there are children here. Families. We're not all like them." Elias looked down, eyes cold. "Neither were we." He walked away as the detonations echoed behind him. The resurgence pulled out hours later, leaving Solaris crippled. The city's once proud spires were twisted ruins, its rich elites reduced to dust or dragging the wounded through rubble. The message was clear. Nowhere is safe. Back on Earth, crowds gathered around makeshift screens in underground cities. When they saw the fire consuming Solaris, they didn't cheer. They didn't cry. They watched in silence. Not because they were heartless, but because this was justice, and they weren't done. The retaliation came fast, brutal, precise. Within days of the Solaris attack, the Council unleashed the Purge Protocols, an ancient, rarely used order meant to cleanse rebellious civilizations before they infected others with defiance. No trial, no diplomacy, just annihilation. Their first target wasn't Earth. It was Mars. The Council believed they'd break humanity by attacking its colonies first, cripple the support, demoralize the resistance. But they didn't know what Mars had become during the blockade. The Red Planet had learned to live on scraps, built cities underground, raised children under artificial skies, and taught them that survival was not a privilege. It was a war. When the orbital bombardment began, they were ready. The Council's dreadnoughts approached with confidence, hurling plasma strikes that vaporized old mining rigs and glassed portions of the Martian crust. But under the surface, buried deeper than even their sensors could detect, were the Ash Wolves, human strike teams that had trained in the dark for this very moment. Captain Aria Devlin led them. She was born on Mars, had never set foot on Earth. Her skin bore radiation burns, and her lungs required filter implants, but her heart? Pure iron. She watched the Council's ships hammer her planet. Then she gave the signal. Within minutes, camouflaged railguns emerged from the crater canyons, locking on and firing with terrifying precision. Human-made fusion torpedoes, cobbled together from illegal tech and smuggled black market parts, burst from hidden silos and found their targets. One dreadnought exploded mid-orbit, its shattered hull raining into the Martian sky like burning confetti. Then the real counterattack began. Mars launched its own fleet, small, fast ships, mostly reprogrammed mining haulers armed with plasma cutters and hacking arrays. They slipped past the chaos, boarded enemy vessels, and turned their own systems against them. By the end of the second day, 3 Council vessels were lost. But the cost was devastating. Entire Martian cities had been leveled, families gone in a blink. The dust storms carried screams and ash across what remained. In one sector, a child was found sitting alone beside a collapsed shelter, his eyes staring at the sky that had tried to kill him. When asked his name, he just said, "I'm Rage now." That became a rallying cry. We're Rage now. Earth heard it. The colonies heard it. Even the rebels hiding in fringe systems repeated it in hushed tones like a sacred vow. Meanwhile, the Council was unraveling faster than it could control. Worlds once loyal started asking hard questions. Why had they lied about Earth's rebellion? Why were so many resources being poured into suppressing a species that, by all rights, should have been crushed a century ago? Why did so many of their own die, while the humans just kept coming back stronger? Some races, quietly, secretly, began supplying Earth with intel. A few even offered weapons. Others defected outright. And through it all, Naomi Reza kept working. Still branded an exile, she operated from the shadows, feeding intelligence to Elias and the Resistance Network. But now, something more dangerous stirred inside her. She had contacts on the inside, allies who knew about the Council's darkest secret, a plan they had developed centuries ago, a final fail-safe, the erasure device, a weapon that didn't destroy a planet but erased it, atom by atom, memory by memory. Nothing left, not even history. It had only ever been theoretical. Until now. She uncovered transmissions that confirmed the Council had activated its deployment process. They intended to use it on Earth, to remove the problem completely, like humanity had never existed at all. Naomi stared at the blinking message on her screen. Coordinates, timelines, activation codes. "This is it," she whispered. The Council wasn't trying to win anymore. They were trying to erase the evidence of their failure. But humanity had a final card to play. Not diplomacy, not defense. A counterstrike so vicious, so unforgettable, that no species, no matter how arrogant, would ever think of crossing them again. Naomi called Elias. "We need to launch everything," she said. "Not just ships, not just bombs." He didn't ask why. He already knew. "Time to give them the one thing they fear most," he said. "What's that?" He smiled, eyes burning with fury. "Human history." It was called the Vault. Buried deep beneath the ice oceans of Virex 7, the Galactic Council's most classified installation sat like a dormant god, silent, invisible, and deadly. No records of it existed in public databases. Only the highest-ranking Council species even knew it was real. It was here that the erasure device was stored, under biolock, time-gated encryption, and a kill switch capable of destroying half the star system if anyone tried to force entry. And now, a team of humans was about to break in. Elias Ward stood in the dim light of the Phantom Wraith, a prototype stealth ship so advanced it shouldn't have existed. It was powered by stolen Tevari Matterfold drives and shielded by tech reverse-engineered from the Council's own cloaking arrays. A small crew of 20 sat ready, each one handpicked from the most lethal corners of Earth's rebellion. No ceremony, no speeches, just quiet resolve. Lynn adjusted her gear, double-checked the fusion blades on her hips, and looked over at Elias. "Even if we get inside, we can't just disable it. They'll rebuild, somewhere else." Elias didn't look at her. "That's why we don't disable it." She blinked. "You mean, we set it off," he said, voice calm. "Here, on Virex 7, let it wipe itself out. The Council loses its trump card and a big piece of its soul." There was silence, and then, one by one, the crew nodded. They understood. It was suicide. But humanity wasn't afraid to die anymore. Not if it meant making history that couldn't be erased. The Phantom Wraith slipped past the outer planetary defenses like smoke. Inside the vault's perimeter, drones hovered silently beneath the waves, scanning for signs of life. But the human ship deployed organic decoys, genetically engineered aquatic beasts that drew attention just long enough for the real team to breach. Elias, Lynn, and Varlock led the infiltration. The interior of the vault was a twisted marvel, alien metals fused with pulsating neural wiring like a living organism wrapped in concrete. At its heart, the erasure device sat on a raised platform suspended in magnetic stasis. It looked like a frozen star, bright, humming with power and impossibly beautiful. And surrounding it, rows of cryopods. Each one held Council scientists in deep stasis, witnesses, custodians of oblivion. "Do we kill them?" Lynn asked, already drawing her weapon. "No," Elias said, pulling a data drive from his pack. "We let them wake up. We want them to watch." He connected the drive to the erasure core. Naomi had embedded a virus, coded in human memory patterns, that would not only trigger the device's implosion, but also embed every Council system with the message. You erased our rights, our homes, our future. Now watch us erase your gods." As the countdown began, alarms flared across the vault. The scientists stirred. Defensive turrets dropped from the ceiling. Sirens screamed in 16 languages, but it was already too late. The humans had uploaded the virus and activated the failsafe. The vault was now a bomb. Elias turned to the team. "Extraction route Omega." Go they ran, dodging plasma bursts and collapsing tunnels. The vault's AI was going into meltdown, trying to override the erasure trigger, but Naomi's code held firm. In 30 minutes, it would all be gone. As they reached the ocean's edge, the phantom wraith rose to meet them. Scorched, half-damaged, but alive. They escaped just as the vault imploded. It wasn't an explosion. It was absence. The entire installation folded inward, then vanished. No debris, no radiation, just silence. All across the galaxy, Council command channels erupted in panic. Their mightiest weapon, gone. Their records of control, their data on Earth's rebellion, their long list of classified threats, wiped clean with it. They tried to cover it up. But it was too late. Within days, resistance movements rose on a dozen Council-aligned worlds. The illusion of the Council's invincibility had cracked. And for the first time in centuries, their enemies weren't afraid. They were angry and united. The Council had always believed in control. Not peace, control. Their entire empire ran on the illusion that order came from obedience, that fear bred stability, and that rebellion could be erased with overwhelming force and a few censored histories. But when the vault vanished, when their own device was used against them, something far more dangerous than rebellion ignited across the stars. Inspiration. It started with the rim worlds. Systems that had been taxed, policed, and silenced for centuries rose overnight. The mining colonies on Velar 9 seized their overseers. On Talax Prime, workers dismantled the Council's propaganda towers and replaced them with crude flags bearing the words, "Never again." Then came defections. Ships abandoned their posts. Captains disobeyed direct orders. Whole planetary militias once loyal to the Council broadcast messages of support to Earth. The Galactic Council, in desperation, enacted the Unity Protocol, a last-ditch effort to preserve their dominance by forcing all remaining member worlds into a single war front. One banner, one army, one goal, the total destruction of Earth and any species aligned with it. They named it Operation Final Dusk. The largest fleet in galactic history began moving. A wall of warships, dreadnoughts, troop barges, and planet killers stretching across systems. It would take weeks to reach Earth's orbit. Elias Ward didn't wait. In a hidden bunker beneath old Chicago, now a fortress of data and steel, he stared at the holograms of the approaching fleet. Thousands of blinking icons, each representing death. "This is it," Naomi said quietly beside him. "We've poked the dragon too many times. Now it's awake." Elias shook his head. This isn't a dragon. Dragons have pride. This question mark. This is a dying god clawing at its tomb. They had only days to prepare. Earth's surface defenses were still patchwork. Missile platforms, cloaked railguns, EMP towers, most of it built from salvaged Council tech. But Elias had one thing they didn't. Unity. He called in every favor. Every ally. Ships from the Martian Resistance, stealth bombers from the Saturn Syndicate, pirate crews from the Andromeda Expanse. Even a few Tavari engineers, once enemies, arrived with experimental plasma cores to supercharge Earth's grid. They weren't just defending Earth. They were defending the idea of resistance itself. As the Council fleet crossed Neptune's orbit, human ships rose to meet them. The sky turned into a battlefield of gods. Explosions lit up the void. Hulls cracked. Pilots screamed. But for every human ship destroyed, 2 more flanked behind it with righteous fury. Elias led from the resurgence, now upgraded, scarred, and more dangerous than ever. Varlock manned the main cannon, while Naomi coordinated the defense nets from an orbital station. Then came the turning point. The Council flagship, Judgment's Reach, emerged from hyperspace, 3 miles long, armed with a singularity core. It unleashed a gravitational blast that tore through human lines, swallowing 6 ships in a second. But Earth was waiting. The old space station on Luna, once thought defunct, activated. Its core, powered by a stolen Council AI Naomi had reprogrammed herself, unleashed a counterwave of anti-gravity that destabilized the Judgment's Reach. In that split second of chaos, Elias ordered every remaining bomber to strike. They didn't hesitate. Humanity's wrath poured into the Council's greatest warship in the form of nuclear fire, kinetic rods, and code virus torpedoes that melted its internal AI. It cracked in half. Then burned. Across the Council's command lines, silence. The unthinkable had happened. Their strongest ship destroyed by humans. Panic rippled through their fleets. Confusion, infighting, and then retreat. The Grand Fleet turned, broken. Not by overwhelming force, but by sheer will. Humanity didn't win because it was stronger. It won because it was angrier, because it refused to go extinct quietly, because it remembered every lie, every scar, and every forgotten scream. In the smoking aftermath of the largest space battle in recorded history, Earth should have had a moment to breathe. But peace wasn't waiting in the shadows. Revenge was. The Council's defeat over Earth didn't unite the galaxy. It shattered it. Within days of the retreat, the once mighty Galactic Council fractured into factions. Some begged for negotiation, seeing Earth's strength and public sympathy as a sign to reform. Others, the old bloods, refused to bow. These were the ancient species, the ones who had built the Council from chains and conquest. Their pride had been too deeply wounded. To them, Earth wasn't a threat. It was a stain that had to be scrubbed from history. And they had one last play. A shadow general known only as Koth Zerun stepped from exile. Thought dead after the border purges centuries ago, he had returned with a fleet of mercenaries, ex-Council enforcers, and planetary assassins loyal only to him. He didn't want to restore the Council. He wanted to end humanity, person by person, planet by planet. Elias learned of him too late. Koth's forces struck the outer colonies first, burning human settlements in deep space, assassinating diplomats, planting propaganda across the networks. He called his campaign the Correction. And unlike the Council, Koth didn't care about war laws or rules of engagement. He wanted fear. One of his first messages was a broadcast on all human frequencies. The screen flickered, static cracking. Then the face of an old reptilian warlord appeared, his skin like dried bone, his eyes black and bottomless. You think you've won, but your victory is an ember in a forest fire. I have no council, no masters. I answer to vengeance, and I will teach you, humans, that rage burns brightest just before extinction. He ended the message by executing a group of captured Martian scouts on screen. Slow, cruel, just to send a message. Elias felt that message like a blade through his chest. Naomi responded with silence. But behind the silence, she was building something terrifying. It wasn't a weapon. It was a virus. Not one for machines, but for minds. She called it Project Lazarus. Built from fragments of council tech and raw human emotion, it was designed to infect Koth's command structure, not through code, but through story, memory, symbols. It spread through visuals, through old war recordings of Earth's survival, through whispers on interstellar channels. It was a digital ghost that reminded even Koth's soldiers what humans had survived, what they'd done to win. And worse, It made some of them question their orders. While Naomi fought in silence, Elias prepared Earth for a second siege. Only this time, the war wasn't coming in neat fleets or predictable patterns. Koth's attacks were random. Guerrilla, dirty, he used suicide pods, sleeper agents, plasma bombs in refugee ships. When he struck Earth, he didn't use dreadnoughts. He used memory leeches, devices that burned out the history archives in major cities, deleting human records, erasing family trees, even war logs from the Great Battle. It wasn't about killing humans anymore. It was about erasing what made them human. In one assault, an entire museum in New Tokyo was wiped clean. Paintings gone, voices gone, names gone. But one janitor, an old man named Yuto, survived. When Elias found him sitting among the ashes, still clutching a scorched datapad, he asked him why he hadn't left. Yuto simply said, "If they erase the stories, they erase us." I stayed to remember. Elias took his words and made them a banner. "We stay to remember." He painted it on ships, uploaded it into firewalls, embedded it in code. And humanity, tired, bleeding but unbroken, began fighting back again. Not just with guns, but with memory, with art, with defiance. It began with silence. Not the comforting silence of peace, but the sharp, cold quiet of anticipation, like the breath just before a scream. Koth Zerun had come to finish what the Council could not. He descended upon Earth with his Nightborn armada, a fleet made from the bones of conquered ships, each vessel radiating stolen energy from obliterated civilizations. No rules, no broadcasts, no demands, just death. He didn't seek surrender. He sought extinction, but he miscalculated. He thought humanity would fight like before, with desperation, grit, and outdated weapons fueled by vengeance. He expected stubborn survivors, cornered and angry. He didn't expect Earth to evolve. Elias Ward stood on the command deck of the Resurgence, not in armor but in black, mourning, not for what had been lost, but for what they were about to become. Behind him stood Varlock, scarred and unshaken, and Naomi, who had long since stopped smiling. They weren't fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to become unchainable. Naomi's virus, Project Lazarus, had reached its final stage. No longer just infecting systems, it was now embedded in the minds of soldiers, rebels, civilians across the galaxy. It carried memories of Earth's fall, its rise, its fury, and it passed from being to being like wildfire. It didn't kill. It woke people up. When Koth's ships entered Earth's orbit, expecting a fractured world, they found a unified defense grid channeling energy from every colony. Mars sent kinetic warheads. Europa fired plasma spears. Titan, once silent, erupted with electromagnetic javelins that pierced Koth's cruisers. But that was just the prelude. Elias activated the final phase of Naomi's plan. The Mirror Core. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a psychological AI that reflected back every command Koth gave, twisting his own orders into doubt among his troops. Soldiers began hearing alternate commands. Ships were split between conflicting directives. Chaos took root. Inside the Nightborn armada, captains fought each other, unsure who truly led. Koth's fury echoed across all channels. "You mock war with tricks and riddles. Come face me like a soldier," Elias answered. The Resurgence broke through Koth's line, flanked by retrofitted rebel cruisers and drones controlled by children on Earth who had grown up learning war like math. They didn't fire first. They let Koth come. His flagship, the Bleeding Maw, locked onto the Resurgence, one final duel. But Elias didn't fire a single shot. Instead, he opened a channel and played Yuto's recording. The old janitor, his voice rough, trembling, speaking over ashes. "You can kill a man, burn a home, erase a name, But you cannot destroy memory. You cannot end what refuses to forget. And then Elias spoke, quiet but unflinching. We don't need to win, Koth. We just need to make sure you're remembered as the last tyrant. And we? The last species you underestimated. Naomi hit execute. The virus spread, not into ships, but into Koth's personal neural core. The AI assistant in his own brain, once loyal, began replaying every atrocity, every scream, every erased world he had destroyed. Koth screamed as he lost control of his own mind. His ship powered down, and Earth, without mercy, opened fire. The bleeding maw exploded into a silent, brilliant storm of white light. The war was over. Not because the enemy had surrendered, but because they no longer had the will to fight. Years later, statues would be raised, not just of Elias, Naomi, or the fallen, but of children who coded defenses from bunkers, of elders who taught history under bombardment, of the nameless who kept stories alive. Humanity wasn't remembered for its violence. It was remembered for its rage. Unbreakable, righteous, and pure. When the Galactic Council tried to erase Earth from the stars, humanity didn't just fight back. It rewrote the ending and made sure everyone remembered forever. The ruins of Earth drifted like a graveyard in the void. Charred husks of once mighty orbital stations lay in jagged pieces, their twisted frames reaching out like skeletal fingers. The debris field stretched for thousands of kilometers, a silent testament to humanity's fall. Where once glittering shipyards had built the future, now only wreckage remained. And in the heart of that wreckage, Eidolon lurked, a shadow among the dead. A warship unlike any before it, Eidolon had not been built in shipyards or christened in the light of day. It had been forged in secret, in the cold dark, assembled from the bones of fallen vessels and the desperate dreams of humanity's few survivors. The black hull swallowed the stars, its angular design jagged and cruel. It was not built for beauty. It was built for vengeance. On the bridge, Captain Jarek Solon stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his sharp gaze locked on the desolation beyond the viewport. His face, weathered by years of war, was unreadable, but the weight of memory pressed against him like a blade to the throat. "We should not have come here," Lenara Voss muttered, her voice low but edged with steel. She stood beside him, arms crossed, eyes scanning the ruins warily. "This place is a tomb." Jarek exhaled slowly. "It's where it all started." Lenara shook her head. "It's where it ended." The bridge was dimly lit, bathed in the cold glow of tactical displays. Around them the crew moved with silent efficiency, ghosts themselves in this haunted place. Jarek turned to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Elias Cade, a wiry man with calculating eyes. "Status?" "Scanners show no activity," Cade replied. "The Dominion hasn't patrolled this sector in years. They think we're extinct." "Let's prove them wrong," Jarek said. The mission was simple. Salvage. The ruins of Earth's orbital shipyards held what few resources still remained from humanity's golden age. Spare parts, old data cores, anything that could keep Eidolon running. Every scrap of technology mattered. They were running on borrowed time, and Jarek knew it. The ship shuddered slightly as docking clamps extended, latching onto the crumbling framework of an old defense platform. With a hiss of pressurization, the airlock sealed, and Jarek led the team onto the station. The corridors were frozen in time. A fine layer of frost clung to the metal, and shattered panels sparked weakly in the stale air. Once, thousands of engineers had walked these halls, overseeing the birth of humanity's mightiest ships. Now, only silence remained. "Spread out," Jarek ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. The team moved cautiously, their boots clanking against the metal floors. Dim emergency lights flickered, casting long shadows. "This place is giving me the damn creeps," one of the crew muttered. "Stay focused," Jarek said. "We're not alone." A second later, the motion scanner pinged. The team froze. Jarek raised his rifle, his heart pounding in controlled rhythm. "Report." Cade checked his wrist display. "Multiple contacts, moving fast." Jarek's jaw tightened. The Dominion was here. A screech echoed through the station, metal against metal, the sound of something inhuman moving in the dark. Then the attack came. The first Clivax warrior dropped from the ceiling, landing in a crouch, its obsidian exoskeleton gleaming in the dim light. Its 4 crimson eyes locked onto the nearest crew member, Ensign Doran. Doran barely had time to scream before the Clivax lunged, its bladed arms slicing through the air. Jarek fired. The kinetic round tore through the Clivax's chest, sending it crashing to the floor in a spasm of alien ichor. The team erupted into action, their rifles spitting fire as more Clivax swarmed from the shadows. The corridor became a killing ground. Jarek moved with the precision of a man who had nothing left to lose. He fired, ducked, reloaded, all muscle memory, all instinct. Beside him, Lenara fought with a cold fury, her pistol blasts taking down 2 more of the insectoid warriors. "We need to move," Cade shouted. Jarek grabbed Doran, what was left of him, and pulled back. They needed to get to the airlock before the station became their tomb. "Fall back!" The team retreated, covering each other as the Clivax advanced with terrifying speed. As they reached the airlock, Jarek turned back, just in time to see one of the creatures lunging for him. For a split second, time slowed. Jarek saw the gleaming blades, the glistening mandibles, the eyes filled with soulless hatred. Then a railgun blast from Eidolon's dorsal cannon vaporized the Clivax mid-air. The station shuddered from the impact. The crew scrambled aboard just as Eidolon disengaged, the docking clamps releasing with a metallic groan. The warship pulled away, its thrusters blazing as the station exploded behind them. On the bridge, Jarek stared at the smoldering ruins. Another piece of humanity. Gone. "Set course for Epsilon Prime," he said. "We're not done yet." As Eidolon vanished into the void, Jarek knew one thing with absolute certainty. This war had just begun. The stars over Epsilon Prime were dim, smothered by the thick nebula that veiled the dead world in twilight. Jarek Solon stood on the bridge of Eidolon, arms folded, eyes locked on the barren planet below. The planet had once been a thriving human colony, a beacon of progress. Now it was a graveyard. "Atmospheric readings?" Jarek asked. "Marginal," Cade replied, his fingers dancing across the console. "Breathable, but the radiation levels aren't friendly. If anyone's alive down there, they're desperate." Jarek exhaled. He already knew the answer. Desperation was all humanity had left. "Take us in," he ordered. Eidolon descended like a phantom, piercing through the thick cloud cover, its black hull nearly invisible against the dead sky. Below, shattered cityscapes stretched for miles, the remains of towering arcologies now nothing but twisted steel and dust. Fires still smoldered in the ruins, their embers casting eerie glows against the cracked streets. The war had ended here in blood and silence. The ship landed in the skeletal remains of what had once been Epsilon Prime's capital. As the boarding ramp lowered, the cold wind howled through the ruins, carrying the scent of ash and decay. Jarek led the team out, his boots crunching against the debris-strewn pavement. Lenara walked beside him, her rifle held at the ready. Cade followed, flanked by a handful of armed crew members. "Spread out," Jarek murmured. "We're not alone." They moved through the ruins in silence, the city's empty streets pressing in on them. The buildings loomed overhead like broken tombstones, their glass facades shattered, their walls blackened from orbital bombardment. Then, movement. Jarek's hand snapped up, signaling a halt. A shadow darted between the collapsed structures ahead. "Scanners picking up heat signatures," Cade whispered. "Human." Jarek tightened his grip on his weapon. "Hold fire." A figure emerged from the rubble. A woman, tall, armored, her face streaked with grime. A rifle was slung across her back, but she held a plasma pistol in her hand, aimed directly at them. More figures stepped out from the ruins behind her. Survivors, gaunt but armed, their eyes filled with suspicion and defiance. The woman studied Jarek for a long moment. Then she spoke. "You should have stayed dead." Jarek held her gaze, unflinching. "And you should have fought harder." The woman's jaw tightened. "Who are you?" Jarek lowered his weapon slightly but did not put it away. "Captain Jarek Solon, United Earth Fleet." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "There is no fleet. There is no Earth." Jarek's expression was cold steel. "Not yet." A murmur passed through the survivors. The woman studied him again, searching for lies. Then she holstered her weapon. "Commander Linara Voss," she said. "Welcome to the last human stronghold." They led the crew through the ruins, down into what had once been an underground transport hub. Now it was a fortress. The walls were reinforced with salvaged plating, the tunnels barricaded and lined with turrets. Hundreds of survivors lived here, men, women, even children, huddled together in the dimly lit caverns. Jarek felt the weight of their eyes on him. "This is all that's left?" Linara whispered, her voice tight with emotion. Voss walked ahead, leading them deeper into the stronghold. "We used to have thousands, now barely 300? Jarek looked at the makeshift medical stations, the rationed food supplies, the exhaustion on every face. These people weren't just surviving. They were dying, slowly, inevitably. In a war room carved out of an old subway station, Voss turned to face Jarek. "Why are you here?" she asked. Jarek met her gaze. "To fight," Voss scoffed. "With what? One ship?" "One ship is all we need." Silence stretched between them. Then Voss sighed, rubbing a hand across her face. "You don't get it. We're not soldiers anymore, Solon. We're refugees." Jarek stepped forward. "And how long do you think you can keep running? The Dominion will come back. They always do." Voss clenched her jaw. "I know that." "Then fight." Voss hesitated. Jarek pressed on. "They burned Earth. They hunted us like animals. They think we're extinct. That's our advantage." Voss stared at him, something unreadable in her eyes. Then, before she could answer, the alarms blared. Cade's voice crackled over Jarek's comm. "We've got company. Dominion dropships inbound." Jarek cursed. Voss's eyes widened. "They must have tracked you here." Jarek turned to her. "Then let's give them a reason to regret it." The underground fortress erupted into controlled chaos. Survivors scrambled for weapons, barricades were reinforced, and the hum of energy rifles filled the tunnels. Jarek moved through the crowd, barking orders. "Get those charges placed at the north entrance. Snipers on the upper levels. If they want to come down here, make them bleed for it." Above, the sky turned red as Clivax dropships descended like carrion birds. Voss fell in beside Jarek, rifle in hand. "You want to fight? You've got one." Jarek gave her a sharp grin. "Let's show them humanity isn't done yet." The first explosion rocked the tunnels as the battle for the last human stronghold began. And Jarek Solon, the last captain of the United Earth Fleet, prepared to make the Dominion pay in blood. The first explosion shook the tunnels like the wrath of a dying god. Dust rained from the ceiling, and a deep, reverberating boom echoed through the underground stronghold. The air smelled of scorched metal and charged plasma. Jarek Solon sprinted down the corridor, his rifle clutched tight, his heartbeat hammering against his ribs. "Status," he barked into his comm. Cade's voice came through, tense but controlled. "They breached the northern barricade. Multiple hostiles inbound. Heavy infantry." Jarek skidded to a stop at the intersection of tunnels, where a dozen survivors were already dug in behind makeshift barricades of steel, plating, and rubble. Lenara Voss crouched behind cover, her rifle snapping off bursts of fire at the advancing enemy. "Report," Jarek said as he dropped beside her. Voss ejected a spent energy cell and slammed in another. "They sent the brutes first, Clivax shock troopers, big, armored, and mean as hell." Jarek peeked over cover. She wasn't exaggerating. The Clivax shock troopers towered over their lesser kin, their exoskeletal plating gleaming in the dim light. Their multi-jointed limbs moved with unnatural fluidity as they advanced, their heavy plasma cannons spitting violet bolts of death. The air sizzled with every shot, burning through walls and sending showers of molten rock cascading onto the defenders. "Fall back!" someone screamed as a plasma bolt vaporized the barricade. Jarek gritted his teeth. "Not like this." "Cade," he said, pressing his comm. "Tell me we've got something bigger than rifles." "Working on it, Captain." The first trooper leapt over the ruined barricade. It landed with a thunderous crash, exoskeletal claws carving deep grooves into the floor. It turned, eyes glowing a sickly yellow, and charged. Jarek fired. The kinetic rounds slammed into its carapace, cracking but not breaking through. The Clivax barely stumbled before swinging a massive claw at him. Jarek ducked. The claw missed him by inches, slamming into the ground hard enough to crack the floor. He rolled away and fired again, aiming for the exposed joints at the creature's neck. It howled in pain as the bullets tore into softer flesh, but it didn't go down. Then a rocket struck it square in the chest. The explosion rocked the tunnel, sending a shockwave of heat and debris outward. When the smoke cleared, the shock trooper was nothing but scorched remains. Jarek turned. Cade stood on the catwalk above, a smoking RPG slung over his shoulder. "You're welcome," Cade said dryly. Jarek allowed himself a smirk. "More incoming." As if in response, a second explosion erupted deeper in the tunnels. The Dominion was pressing their attack, trying to force them into a bottleneck. Voss grabbed Jarek's arm. "We can't win a war of attrition. We need an escape route." Jarek exhaled sharply. She was right. If they held out too long, the Dominion would flood the tunnels with more troops, maybe even an orbital strike if they got desperate, and that meant they had to take the fight to the enemy. "Cade, how many charges do we have left?" "Enough," Jarek nodded. "Good. We're not retreating. We're collapsing the tunnels, on them." The plan was brutal, desperate, and exactly what the situation called for. The survivors set demolition charges at key structural points while Jarek and his team held the line. Every second felt like an eternity. The Dominion troops were relentless. They swarmed in waves, their bladed limbs slicing through makeshift defenses, their plasma cannons reducing cover to slag. But the humans fought like demons, their rifles spitting fire, their grenades tearing through Clivax ranks. Jarek fought with cold precision. Every shot counted. Every move was calculated. He had fought these monsters before, and he knew their weaknesses: joint gaps, sensory nodes, the soft tissue beneath the exoskeletal ridges. He moved like a ghost in the chaos, cutting down one enemy after another. "Charges set," Cade's voice finally came through. "We have 2 minutes before this place comes down." Jarek grabbed Voss' shoulder. "Fall back! Get your people to the evacuation tunnels!" Voss hesitated, her eyes flashing with something unreadable. Then she nodded. The survivors began retreating, firing as they went. The Clivax pushed harder, sensing weakness. Jarek stayed until the last possible second. Then he pressed the detonator. The tunnels roared as fire and rock erupted around them. The shockwave hurled Clivax troops backward, burying them under tons of debris. The screams of the dying aliens echoed through the collapsing corridors, swallowed by the avalanche of destruction. Jarek sprinted for the exit as the world caved in behind him. He barely made it through the final gate before the last charge detonated. The blast sent him sprawling, dust and debris pelting his armor. When he looked back, the tunnel was gone. The Dominion forces were entombed, and the last survivors of Epsilon Prime were free. Back aboard Eidolon, the survivors crowded into the ship's lower decks. Many were injured, all were exhausted, but they were alive. Jarek stood on the bridge, staring at the ruined planet below. Lenara Voss stepped up beside him. "So what now?" Jarek didn't answer immediately. He let the silence stretch, let the weight of what they had done settle. Then he turned to her. "Now," he said, "we make them pay." Voss studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she smiled. Outside, Eidolon's engines flared, and the warship turned toward the stars. The hunt for vengeance had begun. The Eidolon slipped through the void like a phantom. Its black hull reflected no light, no energy, just a whisper of movement against the backdrop of endless stars. The Clivax Dominion still believed humanity was extinct. They had no reason to watch for ghosts. Jarek Solon intended to teach them otherwise. On the bridge, the air was thick with tension. The gathered crew and newly rescued survivors stood in near silence, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of tactical displays. Epsilon Prime was behind them now. Ahead, their first target loomed, a Dominion supply station orbiting the gas giant Borsis IV. Jarek stood at the central command station, eyes locked on the holographic readout of the Clivax installation. It was a sprawling construct of sleek alien architecture, its gunmetal plating covered in the eerie bioluminescent runes of its creators. A lifeline of the Dominion's war machine, and soon to be nothing but wreckage. "How many ships?" Jarek asked. Cade leaned over the sensor console. 2 Dominion frigates, standard armament, a few fighter wings. Nothing we can't handle if we hit fast. Voss folded her arms. "And if we don't?" Jarek didn't look at her. "Then we're dead." No one argued. They all knew what they had signed up for. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about sending a message. Humanity wasn't just alive. They were coming for blood. Eidolon coasted through the darkness, silent, undetectable. Its stealth systems masked its presence, its engines running on minimal thrust. The crew held their breath as the Dominion station grew larger in the view screen. "Frigates are in a patrol pattern," Lenara murmured. "They're not expecting trouble." Jarek's lips curled into a cold smile. "Let's introduce ourselves." He turned to Cade. "Power up weapons. Prepare for precision strikes." Cade's fingers danced across the controls. "Railguns hot. Plasma lances charged. Missile tubes loaded." Jarek took a deep breath. "Fire." The first shot split the void like the wrath of a dying god. A railgun slug, traveling at near relativistic speeds, punched through the shields of the nearest Dominion frigate and tore straight through its hull. Explosions rippled across the ship's frame as entire decks decompressed. Before the Dominion could react, Eidolon struck again. Plasma lances ignited the blackness, carving through the second frigate's engines. The alien vessel spasmed, listing sideways as fire and debris vomited into space. Then the missiles hit. Brilliant contrails of light spiraled toward the Dominion station, striking key structural points. The installation shuddered under the barrage, its defensive turrets scrambling to respond. Too late. Inside the command center, alarms blared in panicked, chittering Clivax tones. Jarek imagined the station's overseer, some smug Dominion officer, lounging in his control seat, utterly unprepared for the nightmare descending upon him. He allowed himself a grim satisfaction. "Bring us in," he ordered. "Boarding teams, get ready." The Eidolon latched onto the damaged station like a predator sinking its claws into prey. The boarding ramp extended, sealing onto the Dominion airlock. Inside, Jarek and his team stood ready, weapons primed. Lenara Voss was at his side, her pulse rifle humming with lethal energy. Cade checked his pistol, nodding in silent confirmation. Behind them, a mix of Eidolon's crew and Epsilon Prime survivors tightened their grips on scavenged Dominion weapons. For many, this was their first real battle. For others, it was a chance at revenge. Jarek didn't bother with a speech. Instead, he hit the breach charge. The door blasted inward. "Move!" Jarek shouted. The first wave of Clivax soldiers barely had time to react before they were cut down. Plasma bolts and kinetic rounds shredded their carapace armor, splattering alien ichor across the walls. Jarek pressed forward, rifle raised, firing in controlled bursts. He dropped one Clivax warrior with a shot to the sensory node, another with a precise burst to the throat. Lenara was a force of nature beside him, moving with lethal grace, her shots never missing their mark. Cade provided cover from the rear, his pistol sending precise energy blasts into any Dominion soldier who tried to flank them. The halls of the station became a war zone. Clivax reinforcements poured in, screeching in their guttural language. They fought like rabid beasts, claws slashing, plasma weapons roaring. But the humans fought harder. They fought for survival. They fought for vengeance. The battle pushed into the heart of the station, the command center. Jarek kicked open the final door and stepped inside. At the center of the room stood a Clivax officer, its elongated skull encased in ornate battle plating. Its 4 glowing eyes fixed on Jarek, mandibles clicking in a mocking rhythm. "You are an infestation," it hissed. "You will be purged." Jarek leveled his rifle. "Come and try." The officer lunged, faster than any human could react. Jarek barely had time to roll aside as a bladed limb carved through the air where he had stood. Lenara opened fire, her rifle blasting into the creature's armor. The Clivax staggered but didn't fall. With a snarl, it struck her with a backhanded swipe, sending her crashing into a control panel. Jarek took his chance. He surged forward, dodging another strike, and jammed his combat knife straight into the officer's throat. The Clivax screeched in agony. Its limbs spasmed as black ichor sprayed across the floor. Jarek wrenched the blade free and fired his rifle point blank. The officer's head exploded in a flash of burning plasma. The silence that followed was deafening. Lenara groaned, pushing herself up. "Damn. Remind me never to get on your bad side." Jarek exhaled, stepping over the corpse. "Secure the station. Take everything useful. Then we burn it to the ground." Cade's voice crackled over comms. "Captain, you might want to see this." Jarek frowned. "What is it?" "Data logs. Communications from High Command. They mention a name. Supreme Warlord Maltheris Vrax." Jarek's blood ran cold. The Butcher of Earth. Lenara looked at him, expression grim. "You think he knows we're alive?" Jarek's jaw tightened. He will now. The message had been sent. Humanity was back, and Maltheris Vrax would soon learn what it meant to fear. The Eidolon burned through the void, a spectral shadow against the endless night. Jarek Solon stood on the bridge, arms crossed, staring at the swirling mass of data projected in front of him. The stolen Dominion logs lay decrypted, their cold, alien script unraveling into something far more chilling. Orders, fleet movements, and a name that had haunted humanity's dying breath. Supreme Warlord Maltheris Vrax, the architect of Earth's annihilation. Jarek's grip tightened on the edge of the console. This wasn't just another Dominion officer. Vrax was the monster who had orchestrated the slaughter of billions, who had broadcast the fall of humanity's last strongholds as a warning to other species that dared challenge Dominion rule. Now, for the first time, Jarek had a thread to pull, and he intended to pull until it snapped. Lenara Voss leaned against the bulkhead, arms folded. "We just struck a Dominion installation and stole their data. It won't be long before they come looking." Cade flicked through the decrypted logs, brow furrowed. Vrax's fleet was last logged near the Chiron Drift. He glanced up. "That's 5 sectors from here." Jarek's expression was unreadable. "Then that's where we go." Voss narrowed her eyes. "That's suicide, Jarek. That's deep in Dominion space." Jarek turned, his voice even. "We're not going in blind." He tapped a location on the holo display. "There's a refueling station on the fringes of Chiron. If we intercept the right supply convoy, we can slip through undetected." Cade gave a low whistle. "Infiltrating a Dominion fleet? You really want to stare death in the face, huh?" Jarek's gaze was steel. "Number, I want Vrax to know that when he finally dies, it was a human who did it." The Eidolon lurked in the asteroid belt surrounding the Chiron Drift. It was the perfect hunting ground. Twisting rock formations, dense radiation pockets, and enough stellar debris to scramble most long-range sensors. Jarek sat in his command chair, watching the tactical display as a Dominion fuel convoy emerged from subspace. 3 tankers, lightly guarded. Perfect. "Engage stealth drive," Jarek ordered. The Eidolon drifted forward like a vengeful wraith. Cade worked the controls. "Weapons locked. Ready when you are, Captain." Jarek's fingers tightened around the armrest. "Fire." A silent storm erupted. Railgun slugs lanced through the blackness, slamming into the lead escort frigate. Its hull buckled, splitting apart in a silent explosion. Plasma beams carved into the second ship before it could react. Within seconds, the convoy's defenses lay in ruins. "Boarding teams, move in!" Jarek led the charge. The Dominion tanker's airlock breached with a flash, and his strike team stormed inside. Clivax soldiers scrambled, caught between confusion and panic. Jarek's rifle barked plasma fire, dropping 2 before they could return fire. Lenara swept forward, her combat blade cutting through an alien's throat in one fluid motion. Cade laid down cover fire, forcing the remaining Clivax into retreat. Within minutes, the tanker was secured. Cade pulled up a terminal, hacking into the ship's logs. "Got something. This convoy was heading to Vrax's fleet." Jarek stepped closer. "Where?" Cade's fingers danced across the console. Then he stopped. "Captain, you're going to want to see this." The screen flickered, showing something that sent ice through Jarek's veins. Not just a fleet, a shipyard, a Dominion dreadnought under construction. Jarek stared at the schematics, heart pounding. This was bigger than revenge. This was the chance to strike a blow that would shatter the Dominion's grip on the galaxy. Lenara stepped beside him. "We destroy that dreadnought, and we cripple them." Jarek exhaled slowly. "Then we make sure it never leaves that shipyard." Back on the Eidolon, the mood was tense. The stolen Dominion ship carried fresh supplies, fuel, and most importantly, an access code to the shipyard's outer defenses. But there was one problem. They weren't alone anymore. Cade stared at the sensor readout, his face pale. "Dominion patrol just dropped out of subspace. They're sweeping the sector." Jarek moved to his command station. "Can they see us?" "Not yet." Voss's jaw tightened. "They will soon." Jarek's mind raced. They had what they needed. But they wouldn't make it to the shipyard if they got caught here. A grim smile crossed his face. Then we give them something else to find. The captured Dominion fuel tanker drifted into open space, its engines flickering. A distress beacon activated, pulsing in Dominion signals. Jarek watched from Eidolon's bridge. "Come on, take the bait." The Dominion patrol altered course. They moved in. Jarek's hand hovered over the trigger. Just a little closer. The Dominion ships arrived at the tanker, scanning. Seconds stretched, then detonation. The tanker exploded in a blinding inferno. A shockwave rippled through space, ripping the patrol ships apart in an instant. The bridge crew let out a collective exhale. Cade grinned. "Hell of a distraction." Jarek sat back. "Set course for the shipyard. We finish this." As the Eidolon disappeared into the void, Jarek allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. Vrax didn't know it yet, but his empire was already burning. The Eidolon was a ghost among giants. Through the viewport, Jarek Solon watched the Dominion shipyard loom before them. Massive, labyrinthine, and bristling with defenses, it hung in the void like a bloated parasite, cradling the monstrous dreadnought under construction. The tyrant's wake. Even unfinished, the Dominion warship dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. A fortress of blackened alloy, bristling with weapons that could reduce entire fleets to smoldering wreckage. Once completed, it wouldn't just cement Dominion control. It would end the possibility of rebellion. Jarek clenched his jaw. "Not if I burn it first." Disguised as the stolen fuel tanker, the Eidolon coasted toward the shipyard under the cover of stolen access codes. The crew held their breath as the Dominion control tower sent a signal. "Tanker V-422, transmit authorization and cargo manifest." Cade, fingers dancing across the console, sent back a falsified response. A moment of silence. Then, "Acknowledged. Proceed to docking bay 14. A ripple of tension released. They were in. Jarek turned to his crew. "We get in, we sabotage the dreadnought, and we get out before they know what hit them." He met their eyes, knowing the risks. "No second chances." Voss loaded her rifle. "Then let's make this count." Docking clamps locked the Eidolon into place. The crew, clad in scavenged Dominion uniforms, stepped onto the shipyard's industrial deck, blending into the chaos of alien workers and automated drones. Jarek's pulse quickened as they weaved through the towering corridors of the shipyard. The air was thick with the acrid scent of fuel and metal. Hulking Clivax overseers barked orders in their guttural tongue, unaware that death walked among them. They moved with precision. Step 1. Locate the dreadnought's core. Cade hacked a terminal, fingers swift. "Schematics loaded. Cores in the lower reactor bay, central deck." Jarek nodded. "Let's move." The reactor bay was a cavernous expanse, lit by the eerie blue glow of containment fields. Suspended in the center was the dreadnought's primary reactor, a fusion of Dominion biomechanical engineering and raw destructive power. Jarek approached, setting a demolition charge on the stabilizer. "We overload the core, and this thing tears itself apart." Cade worked his magic, rerouting security overrides. 30 minutes before meltdown. Then, a voice. Cold, familiar. "I must commend you, Solon." Jarek spun, weapon raised. From the shadows, Maltharis Vrax emerged, tall, imposing. His obsidian armor gleamed under the reactor's glow, his piercing, predatory gaze fixed on Jarek with quiet amusement. "You came all this way," Vrax mused, "only to die here." A dozen Dominion guards stepped from the darkness, weapons trained. They had walked into a trap. Voss's grip tightened on her rifle. "Jarek?" Jarek's mind raced. "Think." Vrax took a step forward. "You are tenacious for a dying breed." His voice was laced with condescension. I watched your world burn, Solon. I remember the screams, the last pitiful gasps of your so-called indomitable spirit. Jarek's eyes burned with fury, but his voice was steady. And yet, here I am, standing in your house, tearing down your empire. Vrax chuckled darkly. Bravado will not save you. He raised a clawed hand. Kill them! Blades of plasma hissed to life. Jarek didn't hesitate. Now! Voss was already moving, her rifle barking a hailstorm of plasma fire. Cade dropped to the floor, throwing an electro-disruptor that sent 2 Dominion guards into spasms. Jarek lunged, dodging a swipe from a Clivax soldier before slamming his combat knife into its throat. The battle erupted in chaos. Cade frantically hacked a nearby console. Shutting down security doors, buying us time. Jarek fired 2 shots into an approaching warrior, but Vrax was already there. The Dominion warlord moved with inhuman speed, backhanding Jarek across the deck. Pain exploded through his ribs. Vrax loomed over him. Pathetic. Jarek spat blood, eyes defiant. You talk too much. With a snarl, Vrax raised his blade. Boom! A massive explosion ripped through the reactor chamber. Flames and debris erupted, the shockwave sending Dominion warriors flying. Jarek looked up. Voss had blown the stabilizer early. The reactor was going critical. Vrax staggered, his gaze snapping to the melting containment field. Jarek seized the moment. He tackled Vrax into the fire. The warlord snarled, claws slashing at Jarek's armor, but Jarek twisted, slamming an impact grenade against Vrax's chest. This is for Earth. He detonated it. A blinding explosion rocked the chamber, flinging Jarek back as Vrax vanished in a firestorm. The dreadnought was dying. The Eidolon's engines roared to life, breaking free from the shipyard as explosions tore through its hull. Dominion defenses scrambled, but they were too late. From the viewport, Jarek watched as the tyrant's wake, the Dominion's ultimate weapon, detonated in a supernova of fire and wreckage. A slow, satisfied smile crept across his face. Lenara slumped into her seat, exhaling. Damn, I can't believe we pulled that off. Cade let out a breathless laugh. Did we, though? Because I was pretty sure we were dead back there. Jarek sat back, staring into the burning remains of the dreadnought. Vrax was dead. But something gnawed at him. Wasn't he? The crew celebrated, but Jarek remained silent, staring into the dark. Because deep in his gut, something told him this wasn't over. Vrax had survived worse. And if he had escaped that inferno, Jarek knew one thing. Next time, it wouldn't be a warship they'd be hunting. It would be a ghost. The Eidolon drifted silently through the void, its crew battered but alive. The destruction of the tyrant's wake had sent shockwaves through the Dominion, but Jarek Solon felt no triumph. The war wasn't over. It had only just begun. As the crew tended to their wounds and celebrated their victory, Jarek stood alone on the bridge, staring into the endless expanse of stars. Vrax's final words echoed in his mind, a chilling reminder that the Dominion's reach was far greater than one warlord. Captain? Lenara's voice broke the silence. She stepped beside him, her expression a mix of exhaustion and resolve. What now? Jarek didn't answer immediately. His gaze remained fixed on the stars, where the faint glow of distant systems flickered like embers in the dark. Finally he spoke. We keep fighting, for Earth, for humanity, for every world the Dominion has crushed. Lenara nodded, her resolve mirroring his. Then we'll need allies, more ships, more soldiers. Jarek turned to her, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Then we'll find them, and we'll make the Dominion regret the day they thought they could erase us. The Eidolon's engines flared, and the warship surged forward, cutting through the darkness like a blade. Behind them, The wreckage of the tyrant's wake burned, a beacon of defiance in the void. Ahead, the stars awaited. And Jarek Solon, the last captain of the United Earth Fleet, would not rest until humanity's light shone brighter than ever before.